graphic scenes, including apocryphal texts, so those texts that were excluded from the Bible. Yet there we have got some very pagan elements. For example, in this part you can see just at the head of the cross just this circular thing which looks like the eye of a cyclope, you know, the wind. So we've got the impression that we are pulling inside the cross. And this is actually swastika, so a very pre-Christian symbol of the sun, spiral symbol of the solar power. And just below, already on the shaft, we've got the lozenge. So this kind of solar pre-Christian symbol, which was also incorporated into Christian tradition. So all of that actually now is the symbol of Christianity, of the power of Christ. In the lozenge, which is also very important for the Book of Health, we've got the fourfold unity of the world. So 4 cardinal points of the earthly world and of the God power. Now, it's very important to understand how these high crosses can be divided. So they are divided into 3 parts: the head, the shaft, and the base. And this cross is actually very unique among all high Irish crosses in Ireland, because first of all, most of the carvings is positioned on its base, and this transitional part between the base and the shaft. Whereas most high Irish crosses got most of the carvings just on the shaft and on the head. And here we can see that just that the head and the shaft feature only some animal and ornamental representations as it is seen now. Very important is also to remember that high Irish crosses were positioned according to cardinal points. And in Christology, very important is the west and east. So eastern face of the cross and western face of the cross. Why? Because west is associated with the crucifixion, whereas east with the last judgment and the second coming of Christ. Also, the western part shows more ancient Old Testament scenes, so chronologically earlier than those shown on the eastern part. This is quite important to actually understand, because this cross was reassembled in the 19th century, and I think in a wrong way, because what we've got on the western part is actually what should be on the eastern part, and the other way around. So, starting from the so-called western part of the cross, we've got crucifixion, of course, we've got it, but the other part, as you will see in a moment, shows the scene from the Old Testament, which is much earlier, and is shown back to back the crucifixion. So, we will start from the base. This is the base of the cross, and you can see one single panel. It is filled in beautifully carved 12 apostles. 1, 2, 3, 4, multiply by 3, we've got 12, okay? So, we've got 12 apostles, which are carved in a flat carving. As you can see, these are very flat figures. This is actually graphic, which is naive and primitive, and it's very typical of Paleo-Christianity, especially in Oriental tradition, Christian tradition. And this is actually one of the features which are unique for this cross, because usually the style which was coming to Ireland from continent was like a specially rounded relief, more classical, naturalistic and modeled images of figural representations. And now we've got just graphics, which is quite naive, at the same time very charming, as you can see here. So, 12 apostles, so these scenes happened before the crucifixion, because Christ gathered his disciples yet before he was crucified. So this scene starts. So we start interpretation from bottom up. And now when we are moving to this transitional part between this part and that, the shaft, we can see crucifixion. So Christ is represented crucified just in the middle, and here these two figures come actually from the apocryphal texts. So one of them, this one on the right, is called Longinus. This was a Roman soldier who pierced Christ's heart. You know, our heart is just in the chest, in the middle, and slightly to the left. So he must be standing on the right just to pierce the heart which is on the left. Okay? So this is a Roman soldier, Longinus, who is piercing Christ's heart. And according to Christian legend, he was blind. And at the time when he was pierced Christ's heart, some blood fell down on his eyes and he started to see. Okay, and then he believed in Christ as God. Okay, on the left of the Christ, there is another figure, and this one carries a long stick with a sponge with vinegar wine. And this is actually put to Jesus' mouth. And actually in his mouth, it could bring some relief or a torture. So there is a discussion if it was the act of torture or mercy. So this one here is interpreted either as a Roman soldier, Stephen, or some standbyer. And theologians from the Middle Ages say that it was the act of torture, and it was actually a Jewish standbyer who wanted to actually bring more pain to Christ at the end of his life. Now we'll move to the so-called eastern part, but I think this is actually western part of the cross. So back to back the crucifixion, we've got the Old Testament scene of the fall of man, which is actually Adam and Eve. They are standing, they are flanking the tree, as you can see, and this tree ends in two projections, and these projections are symmetrically carving backwards with some fruit in it. As you can see, this is the trunk, and just around this trunk there is a protruding part which is actually the snake. Now you can see the head of the snake here. So, as you can see, this scene is earlier in chronology than the crucifixion. So that was the reason why Christ needed to be crucified. So crucifixion is actually the consequence of the original sin. So I think that it should be seen as the western part, not the eastern part of the cross. What is more, up there you can see the crucifixion actually in the head of the cross. So there is the proper crucifixion of Christ, and you can see his arms spread, and above there is some unidentified figure, some animal-like figure. It's difficult to say actually. And we've got here again ornaments, some animals uncoiling from the bosoms, and different other interlace and decorations. Now, coming back to the base, here is again Old Testament scene representing Daniel in the lion's den. But it is quite different from typical representation, because usually Daniel is represented in a frontal as well as here in the middle of the lions, but there are usually 2 or 4 symmetrically positioned lions, whereas here we've got 7 lions. Why? Because possibly it's not the moment when he was thrown into the pit with the lions during the reign of the Persian king Darius, but during the time of the preceding king Cyrus. And there is an apocryphal part of this book of Daniel, which is called Bel and the Dragon. And this is possibly the representation of this apocrypha to the book of Daniel. Okay, now we are moving up, and we've got another Old Testament scene. This is the sacrifice of Isaac. Abraham was actually asked by God to kill his own son. God wanted to know if Abraham is faithful enough and he would follow God's will to the end. And Abraham actually decided, yes, that he would kill his own son in the name of God. But according to the Apocrypha, actually, it wasn't God himself who ordered him to kill his son, by the devil, the fallen angel who actually wanted to put Abraham on some kind of a trial, on a test, okay? So Abraham got a knife in his hand. There is a sacrificial table and Isaac bending over that. And at the very last moment, the good angel, it was possibly Saint Michael or Saint Zetkiel, another archangel which is actually forbidden in our culture. So this angel, at the very last moment, avoided killing Isaac. And you can see here, just above Isaac's back, a ram. Ram was offered instead of Isaac for sacrifice. So this is why he is here. It is here shown just by the side of Isaac. But where is this angel? Well, you can see that Abraham is sitting on a high back chair. That's right. And what we've got here? Some scholars say that this is decoration of the chair, which looks like a bird. Actually, Irish scribes, monks, or according to Irish lore, angels could take the form of birds. So animals in general were in a great esteem in Irish culture. And this is why they were ascribed with spiritual powers. And also birds were seen as angels, bringing bread, bringing food to hermits, or simply helping. That's right? So, many a time also Saint Michael is described in Irish lore as not a human being, but a bird with claws. So, now we've got a bird, which can be interpreted as an angel whispering to Abraham's ear, don't do that, okay? And now, let's move now to the so-called north side of the cross. So, starting again from the bottom, we've got a beautifully decorated panel, as you can see, because in the so-called western side, we've got one panel only, and here we've got the division, yes, between into two different panels of the base. So here at the bottom, we've got some kind of beast, six-headed beast. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So actually, this is a kind of symmetry. We've got here a beast which look like a lion, here like a dragon, and here some snakes maybe. And this is interpreted usually as a six-headed apocalyptic beast. But actually, according to the Apocalypse of Revelation, the apocalyptic beast has got 7 heads, not 6. So we cannot believe actually in this interpretation in full. What we can see here is the same what we can observe in the Book of Kells or in other illuminated manuscripts, namely metamorphosis, changing from one form into the other, symmetry. So we've got a heraldic symmetry of these 2 heads, the next 2 heads above, and this in the upper part. So this is actually, again, transformation from one form to the other. And just out of this picture, we can see also this crossing, as you can see here and here. This cross, or this crossing, is made by means of the necks of the animal. And once again, we've got the crux decusata. So it is either the first letter from the Greek word for Christ, Kai, or the number 10 in the Roman numbering, or simply the cross as the symbol of the Christ sacrifice. Now we move up, and we've got another very, very mysterious scene. Actually, this is interpreted as temptation of Saint Anthony. Saint Anthony is the saint from Christian Egypt. It is one of the most important saints in Coptic tradition because he is called the father of monasticism in Egypt. And this kind of monasticism, ascetic living in isolation, was transplanted in Ireland in the 6th century. So St. Anthony is very important for Irish as well, for the same reasons as for the Egyptians. The case is that this scene actually can be interpreted in different ways. St. Anthony was tempted while he was in the desert by evil spirits. So this scene, temptation of St. Anthony, appears in Christian art in the medieval times, in Renaissance, and in later times as well. And here we can see actually two flanking figures look like demonic ones because they are part human, part animal-like, but they look rather like domestic animals here. You know, this is like a goat-like zoanthropomorphic figure, and here we've got a cock, the cock or a hen possibly. So maybe for the Irish it was easier to show actually domestic animals as devils or some evil powers than to show some kind of different figures expressing evil spirits. Anyway, this scene can be also interpreted in a different way. According to some other scholars, this is actually St. Patrick. And this scene represents one of his hagiographic event. So St. Patrick actually was involved in a contest with Druidic priests to show whose god is more powerful, the pagan one or Christian one. So he was supposed to show that Christ is the most powerful of all. And the Druidic priests, to show the power of their gods, they actually were able to change their shapes, okay? So they changed from being human to being animals. And now you can see that they are changing their forms, and they also whisper some spells to St. Patrick's ears. So this scene can be interpreted in both ways. But anyway, we can see that this is one of the saints, either Coptic or Irish, either St. Anthony or St. Patrick. And then we are moving to the transitional part. And now we for sure have got two saints from Christian Egypt. This is St. Paul, because his beard is longer, he was older. And this is St. Anthony. That's for sure. Why? Because their hagiography shows the very exact moment when those saints are sharing bread. The bread, the loaf of bread is here, and they're holding it in their hands. That's right. They are sitting on high back chairs as well, and they are seen in profile. And this bread, the loaf of bread, was brought to them by the raven. Raven is shown here. It's a little bit fluffy, and it is shown in profile. And he has just brought the bread, the loaf of bread, to them. Actually, St. Anthony was in the desert on his own first, but he heard from the angel about St. Paul, who was dwelling in the desert for a long time. He actually started his life in the desert, forced to do so because he was persecuted as a Christian. It was at the end of the 3rd century. So he had to escape to the desert, and he lived there, taken care by God himself, who provided him with food and with water. So till the moment when St. Anthony joined St. Paul, the raven brought only half of the bread. And then when the two saints met, he started to bring the whole loaf of bread. Okay, now move to the south side of the cross. And again, starting from the bottom, we've got New Testament scene now. And this is multiplication of food. This is a miracle that Jesus made to actually feed the multitude multitude of people gathering around him to listen to his preaching. So we've got 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes, which were changed into multiply loaves of breads and fishes. And 2 fishes are seen here, and once again, possibly are seen here, but from this different perspective. Can you see that? So here we can spine of the fishes, and here they are seen from the different perspective, which is quite common. Also, this is applied in the Book of Kells and in other illuminated manuscripts, that we can see different objects from different perspectives. So, actually, this is the same fish, but seen from different 2 perspectives. Okay, and now we move up, and again, we've got a New Testament scene showing a flight of the Holy Family into Egypt. So, we've got here, once again, Virgin Mary, Christ child on a donkey, pulled by Saint Joseph. So, before that happened, actually, the angel appeared to Saint Joseph to warning him of what is going to happen with the Christ child if they wouldn't have escaped. Actually, the angel, Lord's angel, avoided Christ to be killed, slaughtered by Herod at that time. What you can see here, and what is very important, and you can see that also in the Book of Kells on St. Cuthbert's coffin, that the head of Christ is diagonal to the figure of Virgin Mary. Okay? So possibly his body was painted over the body of the Virgin Mary. So the whole cross actually was covered in polychrome, in painting. So it was colorful actually. So this crossed opposing directions, these cross diagonals, are very typical of the Hiberno-Scottish tradition. So it is also in the Book of Kells, in the full page illumination showing St. Virgin and Christ child, and also on St. Cuthbert's coffin, where actually 2 figures create a kind of crossed diagonals, and at the same time the symbols of crux decussata. And now we are moving here. It's one of my favorite scenes because it shows 3 Hebrews in the fiery furnace. So we've got 3 children of Judah who were thrown into the fiery furnace by the order of the king Nabuchodonosor because they refused to glorify an idol. So they stayed faithful to their faith in one God. And because of their being faithful to one religion, God sent them one angel to help them. And this angel put out the fire in the fiery furnace so that they were saved. This scene appears on high Irish crosses 7 times. This is one of the scenes represented in stone, but it's quite different. Why? Because here we've got the furnace, as you can see, and the children are inside it. Usually in such scenes, this is an angel who forms by means of his wings this dome above the heads of the 3 children. This kind of domes is also created by 2 archangels in the Book of Kells, when they form a kind of arch above the heads of Christ child and his mother. And what is more, this particular angel has got 4 wings, like butterfly. In Christian tradition, Judeo-Christian tradition, usually 4 wings were the features of cherubim, a very high angels in the hierarchy, in heavenly hierarchy. But in Ireland, and according to Irish descriptions, also Saint Michael got 4 wings, and he is usually represented in later depictions as 4-winged archangels. And this scene is very typical of Christian Egypt, and it is shown while the Archangel Michael assumes the pose of Christ himself as Salvator Mundi and says these 3 children as their savior and the savior of humankind as well. So as you can see, these Old Testament scenes are here not to show truth about the Old Testament itself, but to show the truth about the gospel. So it's like a prefiguration of the Christian message in the Old Testament scenes. And what is even more intriguing, that these Old Testament scenes were typical of Paleo-Christian world. And this Paleo-Christian world actually appeared in the very first centuries of Christianity, like in the Roman catacombs, and disappeared slowly around the 4th, 5th century when Christianity became a legal religion. Yet they reappeared here on high Irish crosses starting from the 8th century on till the late 10th century. Now, when it comes to angels, we've got another representation which is possible just in the head, just in the middle of the head of the cross, and it's circular ring. We've got the cross, the Greek cross, which is enclosed by the ring, okay? And on the terminals of the cross's arms, we've got two representations which now are very blurred, but possibly these are two angels guarding, you know, the symbol, the solar symbol, which is now to represent Christianity. And what is more, we can say that there is one important message of the cross. This is God's help for humankind. You can see it by means of the Old Testament and New Testament scenes. As we can see in the scene of the three children in the fiery furnace, God helps by sending his angel to people. So it was to encourage early Christians who experienced persecutions to stay faithful to their religion, in their beliefs, and to have enough courage and to wait for resurrection, to be reborn after their death.